Hello, everyone, and welcome to Heroes Journey, a podcast dedicated to all things comics and superheroes here on CBR. My name is Sean O'Connell, and that is Sierra Nutkevitch. We are going to shift gears over to the DCU, which is trying to get another film off the ground, starring not a brand new character, obviously a time-tested character, but a new interpretation of Kara Zor-El, a.k.a. Supergirl, as played by Millie Alcock from The House of the Dragon, and also Sirens, if people watch Sirens on Netflix. So Millie Alcock was showcased in the closing minutes of James Gunn's 2025 film, Superman. I don't know why I said that with a question mark.
Because it's the longest year on record.
It feels that way. And, she came across as a hot mess. And we started to realize that, she's the inspiration for why Krypto is such a bad dog. Well, not bad dog. I'm sorry.
There's no such thing as a bad dog.
I know. As soon as it came out of my mouth, I realized, that's the wrong way to put it. He's
trying to start fights.
He's in need of discipline. He might need a little bit of discipline. How about that? And so this is an adaptation of Tom King's graphic novel, Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. It is that book or eight-issue miniseries is kind of a episodic intergalactic journey between Kara and a character named Ruthie, who is going after a villain who murdered Ruthie's father in cold blood. It's a vengeance mission. This is not a deep, hard R, but this does show this is not Superman territory. Like, we're in a totally different world here. The Supergirl trailer dropped on Thursday. I was able to see it at a exclusive, posh event for the media in New York City. But Sierra hasn't seen it yet. And so what we're going to do now is live reaction to Sierra watching the Supergirl trailer. So set it up for me, Sierra. How do you feel about Supergirl? Did you like Superman? Do you like Millie Alcock? What's the deal?
Love Superman, love Millie Alcock, excited about this tentatively. I think James Gunn has not betrayed my trust yet. Mm. So the hopes are high. The standards are high. I guess we'll see. I'm already seeing that there's I haven't paused. I'm already seeing a very different color palette. I'm seeing a distinctive vision, and that's always a nice thing to have in your universe.
Well, worth noting, different director. It's Craig Gillespie, who directed I, Tonya. So this is the first DC film that doesn't have Gunn's fingerprints on it. This is a big step because he's done the Peacemaker films or the Peacemaker seasons. He did Superman, obviously. He's going to do Man of Tomorrow. So this is the first time someone else is taking a crack at something in that universe. So, all right, Sierra, press play and let's get your live reaction.
Oh my gosh. Okay. And play. Okay.
Let's hear
Coming soon.
Let's hear it. What'd you think?
It has me very excited. I like that I have a lot of thoughts. Let me go organize them all. I like that they're positioning them opposite each other. I think it does feel like I'm a little surprised that James Gunn didn't want to do this because it does feel very Guardians.
Very. Yes, very. I'm a little shocked that it's not Gunn in the fact that it feels so much Guardians.
Yes, I think it's going to have more pathos. So my favorite versions of Supergirl are the angry, really angry versions of Supergirl. Mm-hmm. Because that's the only version of her that makes sense. I think it's just, okay, I am going to go on a little bit of a tangent about the Supergirl character for a second. And
Please.
This is coming from the big sister energy. You are made responsible for a little baby as a teenage girl. Mm-hmm. And you are sent off away from everyone you've ever known and loved. And your whole purpose is to protect this little person. And you arrive on this planet too late, having already failed in your mission. And now you're in a position where the kid that you knew that you were supposed to take care of is now trying to parent you. Mm. And and like the maturity level that you would have as like having been a teenager put in this in this very traumatic situation, the PTSD out the wazoo. Like I just that's the only, like, I think the teenage angst being calcified by trauma is such an interesting character, and it's so meaty, and I'm excited to see that it seems like this is digging in. What was it like? So what were the reactions in the room with, like, Millie Alcock was there, James Gunn was there, Peter Safran was there?
Yeah. Yes. So this was an event that Warner Brothers and DC held up in New York City. It was essentially held in a bar that had a small stage where Gunn and Craig Gillespie introduced the trailer. They had 3 big screens around this bar to be able to show the trailer off. So it was like maximum Dolby atmosphere, just blaring through, which worked incredibly well for the Debbie Harry, Blondie choice of Call Me. Obviously, Kara's wearing a Blondie t-shirt. I got a chance to speak to James after the fact, and he said that to him, Debbie Harry, who's kind of become a personal friend of his over the years because she's been such a fan of Feastmaker, she embodied the Supergirl rebellious spirit of CBGB's, the nightclub in the 1970s in New York City. And that's the tone that they're sort of going after to sort of capture with Millie Alcock. The crowd ate it up. They loved it. It had that sort of crowd pleasing blast of energy. So to me, I think it's going to work really well. Even the skeptics who are like, it's just going to be Star-Lord again, but in the DC universe, I don't think that, first off, that's not fair. And also, that's okay. Like, the first Guardians is a blast. So if you're going after a movie that mirrors that tone, I'm totally fine with that. I think that's great.
I also think I don't know that that's fair. I feel like they're a completely different kind of character, completely different levels of self-destruction. And I think it's like Star-Lord's, I think his intense ego and narcissism and selfishness comes from a place of being like a scared little boy and only needing to rely on himself. And I just don't think that that's the same kind of, like, I don't think that, like, that's not, though, even though their like origin is very similar in many ways, like being taken from their world and losing the people that they love, the reaction she's having is very, very different. Like, and the quips are going to seem to have like a little bit of a different energy. This also, just like from a filmmaking standpoint, is gorgeous. It is textural. The color, the framing is so beautiful that I'm like, this is cinema.
Yeah. What? Who put my cinema in a superhero genre? How dare they do such a thing?
I mean, somewhat like, this is where I think this is kind of where we might start to see like differences in the DC versus Marvel machines. Marvel has a house style. They want, for the most part, you want journeyman directors, or they want directors who have their own voices, but will like meet them where they're at with their style that will like conform to their idea of what it should look like. DC seems to be like, let's take these directors with very distinctive voices, very distinctive characters, and let each movie be its own thing. I think where we're going to start to see that, I think we're going to start to see the effect of that, whether that's going to be like positive in the long run, is when those stories start to cross over.
Yeah,
and
true.
Be in control of any particular thing. But I find it exciting. I like variety, different attitudes, different perspectives.
Well, for people who don't know, so the Tom King graphic novel is very sci-fi. It's very intergalactic. Like, this is not going to be set on Earth. This is going to be Supergirl and the young girl Ruthie, who she's helping, almost, regrettably, jumping from planet to planet. And so we get the briefest, tiniest snippet of Momoa's Lobo. I'm unsure yet how he's going to be involved, because Lobo's not a character in the Tom King story. So even though, here's my initial concern, and I'll use this as a and it's mild and it has nothing really to do with the film in general. But I'll use the parallel to the MCU. The DCU, to get off the ground, is using a lot of Superman, Supergirl, the House of L, right? Like, let's just say, because you're getting Superman, Supergirl, Man of Tomorrow, right? That would be similar to the MCU getting off the ground with Iron Man, Iron Man 2, and Pepper Potts the movie, and so maybe like it's a lot in that universe. And you just mentioned diversity, at least where the MCU was able to do like a Thor film, a Captain America film set in the 1940s, and then it came all together in an Avengers film. Like, yes, we are getting Clayface in October of next year, but I'm wondering if it's enough diversity yet. And then Lanterns gets pushed back even more. If Lanterns was kind of coming in and breaking that up a little bit. So it's a lot of the House of L when you're launching a cinematic universe. I don't know if that's going to be a problem just yet, or if the stories will be different enough that people will be engaged.
If we think about it, if we're comparing to the MCU, Iron Man, 2008, Incredible Hulk, 2008, Iron Man 2, 2010, so 2 years later, Thor, 1 year later, Captain America, same year, Avengers, the year after that. So it had a slow start as well. And so I don't think it's so crazy to be doing that, because it's like you have 2025, we have Superman. 2026, we have Supergirl, Clayface, and Lanterns. And so it's like, if anything, it's faster. We keep thinking of it, DC's doing a slow start. But like in actuality, it only feels like that because we're in it. They're really like picking it up. And so it might not feel that way for very long. It might in the same way that it was Iron Man's world and we were all just living in it for a couple of years there.
Right.
It might be that it stops feeling that way once they start expanding in like 2 years.
Well, and I do have a story so we're recording this on Thursday, like immediately after the Supergirl trailer. I have a story on CBR that landed on Friday, although you guys are watching this on Saturday, where I asked James Gunn, like, how come Man of Tomorrow so soon when you have all of these other DC projects that you kind of announced at the time of the DC slate, the 10-year slate? And it had films like Swamp Thing, that James Mangold was going to do. It had a Wonder Woman project where everyone's waiting on some updates on Batman the Brave and the Bold. Like, how come Man of Tomorrow jumped ahead? And Gunn told me, and I can say it now because the quote's out there, that when he'd been thinking about it for a really long time. And when he sat down to write it, it went much faster than he anticipated. He ended up with his draft and then revisions, and then it was kind of ready. And he said, it's not a Christmas movie. It's definitely a summer movie. So if he didn't get it ready for 2027, then it would have been waiting for 2028, and that would have just been too long. So it really comes down to windows, which I find really interesting, because that's what I was listening to a Ryan Johnson conversation where he was talking about Wake Up Dead Man. And why that movie doesn't have a longer run in theaters and before it ends up going to Netflix. And he talked about the fact that these windows of opportunity that really dictate when your movie comes out and what it's going to compete with. And for Wake Up Dead Man, and I'm not getting that far off tangent, for Wake Up Dead Man, it had to worry about Avatar, which needed these IMAX screens, right? For the DC universe, it has to think about when's the right time for us to drop these projects in. And that's a little bit what Peter Safran told me about Lanterns too. He was like, look, we could have forced Lanterns into the early part of 2026, but we wanted a better window for it to ramp up its promotion and to get things out there for it. So they just punted to the summertime. And so I get it. These are all the decisions that are going on behind the scenes.
I mean, it's interesting. We haven't really talked about your feelings about the content of the trailer.
Oh, yeah, sure. I think it's great. I love the tone of it. If it's selling me, I had the same takeaway you did, which is like, oh, this is Heavy Guardians. And you're starting with a record player. You're starting with Krypto peeing on a newspaper. It has that kind of rebellious, we're going to be in your face, with the real punk rock. No offense to Clark Kent, who is a faux punk rocker, if anything.
Getting into the Superman debates.
And I think Millie, it looks great. I think she looks perfect as the cast. Like so many of these movies boil down to, did you cast the right person? And in this brief bit that we're getting with her, I think she looks fantastic. I think the emotional core of the film is going to be dependent on the chemistry that she has with the young actress who's been cast as Ruthie. I'm blanking on her name. I'm not familiar with her work. I think Lobo is going to be fun, but it's going to be, to me, from what I understand, a glorified cameo. He's not a significant part of the film. I think he'll show up at one point to maybe help Supergirl go off on a different direction, maybe escape from that scenario that we see in the bar where all the guns are pointed at her kind of thing. But I think really the story is Supergirl and Ruthie going after Krem of the Yellow Hills, I believe the villain's name is.
For our listeners who might not be so familiar with Lobo and the character and what he represents, what does that usually mean?
He's a bounty hunter, who's essentially gun for hire, but on a galactic scale. So he does bounce around the universe, taking multiple jobs, and that often either pit him. He could be pitted against the top DC superheroes. He could team with the top DC superheroes. It's whoever's paying for his services, right? And in a nutshell, visually, he looks like Jason Momoa. So
yeah.
So when you paint Jason Momoa with white body paint, and the right black accents, the dude looks like Lobo. So what I think is going to happen, and I have no real confirmation of this, is that Lobo will be on some type of a bounty hunt, a mission of some sort that is going to put him in Supergirl's path, and they'll interact for a bit. But I think it's really just going to be a way to set him up for use in the universe down the line, whether it's a Lobo film or if he's part of a bigger ensemble piece, where they just have Momoa on board. So Momoa obviously is a holdover from the old DCEU, played Aquaman in multiple films and in the Justice League, but he's wanted to play Lobo for the longest time. Like Gunn has joked that when he took over the DCU, one of the first text messages he ever got was from Momoa that just screamed, like in all caps, Lobo with exclamation points, like 1 million exclamation points. So
honestly, what an icon for that. I think it does really indicate that, like what we were talking about with, well, it's House of El, but we're planting, and I know that, like, of course, Gunn is not like the main creative force behind it, but he is, the orchestrator, the architect of the DCU, and so I have to imagine he is participating in choices like that. I think it's an indicator that they are trying to expand and set things up and do those, those Nick Fury breadcrumbs for the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And so the other elements of the trailer that stand out to me, I am glad that we're going to get to spend some time on Krypton, because essentially Kara was trapped on Krypton for years and watched the planet die slowly, which contributes to that angst that you were talking about earlier and the trauma, which is going to help shape her personality. And then, of course, how much of her time are we going to see her in the suit? We get it very briefly at the end. To me, I think it's going to be, it's a great suit, but I think it's going to be a third act battle that she wears it in, and that for the most part, she's in the trench coat. I
think it's like what a symbolic claiming of her family. Like, I think it has a lot of weight for her to be returning to this. I also, just as a side note, because if we're going to see Krypton, if we're going to see it, like, if Kara is a person who has interacted and was charged with Kal-El, with Clark, with Superman's well-being, how does that, sorry, spoilers for the Superman movie, if you haven't somehow seen it but are watching this.
We're still watching this.
And we're still watching. We have to contend now with this retconning of what the House of El stands for.
True.
Their sort of eugenics, colonizing ideas.
Right.
So I'm very curious what's going to happen there, because we're going to have to meet them, presumably. And also, does she hold those views? If so, that's your lead character. That's your...
Absolutely. And could also then speak to why James Gunn thought of Millie by watching her in House of the Dragon or Game of Thrones, which is very steeped in the politics of the day, and the lineage of certain houses. Like, he could have this bigger thing in mind of like, oh, I want to do something different with Jor-El and the Kryptonians, and we're going to learn more about it in Supergirl. And there's a reason why this girl stands out to me, because she's in Game of Thrones. So I don't know, pure speculation, but we're going to get some Krypton.
Yeah, I'm going to be very interested to see how they contend with it, because it's a very controversial choice. And I think with this movie being the next one, it's like they're going to have to double down on it or backtrack. And
Yeah.
So
I don't know.
Either way, people are going to be mad or people are going to be vindicated.
But this
Both.
is a tease. This is but a small tease in our journey to Supergirl, which is going to land in theaters on June 26th, 2026. Sierra, tell the people who they have to listen to on this week's show.
Today we had the privilege of speaking to Tim Blake Nelson, star of such incredible films as The Incredible Hulk and many Coen Brothers movies, Holes, so much more. We hope you enjoy.
Do you remember who introduced you to comics? Do you remember someone who specifically maybe handed you your first book, or was it maybe like a spinner rack that you caught in a store somewhere?
It was the latter. It was a spinner rack that I caught in a store in Tulsa, Oklahoma, at a place called Steve's Sundries. And I, like many little boys, was attracted to the colors and the wild characters and felt like I had somebody out there who maybe understood me.
And sometimes we get this response from people whose parents they don't get it. Like they don't understand the obsession of young boys like myself. Did you have supportive family members who were like, oh yeah, read as many as you can?
I had quasi-supportive family members in that there was no encouragement to read DC or Marvel whatsoever. In fact, if anything, there was mild discouragement. But if we wanted to read Doonesbury or BC or Pogo even,
okay,
we were encouraged.
Strips were okay?
Yes, strips were okay if they were cerebral.
Oh, okay.
Oh, interesting.
But I think that's something of a misnomer, because I'm one of those people who thinks that comics of any sort are cerebral, because I think that their audience is meant to be a smart, nerdy audience. Comic books are for the opposite of people who are stupid. They're for smart kids.
Yeah, very true.
Because there's so many lacunae in comics that there aren't in prose, because you're really getting moments, and so you're filling in a lot. But also world building and universe building comics, there's a lot of inference going on. Mm-hmm. And the comics themselves are usually relating to geopolitical concerns, mm-hmm. because the writers of comics are also really smart and engaged.
Was there a particular storyline, like a formative one, that made you you developed this opinion that made you think this is what I want to be spending my time on? Really,
what inspired me to write this novel and really to dive into superheroes, the world of superheroes, was being engaged with the MCU. It was from that moment when Gail Ann Hurd and Louis Leterrier sat me down at a hotel downtown in New York City and said, we want you to come on to what's going to be the second MCU film, The Hulk, and you're going to play this scientist who then becomes the villain in the next movie. And I had already seen Iron Man and thought it was an extraordinary accomplishment. And so once I learned I was going to get to be a part of all that, I took a deep dive and still haven't come up for air, if that metaphor makes any sense. Well, effectively, I should be dead if that's true.
As someone who is so deeply invested in the success of this genre, then, I want to ask from your unique perspective how the machinery has evolved from 2008, when you were doing the Hulk, to even 2024, 2025, when you're working on Captain America. Has it evolved drastically, or is it still kind of the same tools?
Well, a lot of that is addressed in the novel, and I hope people will read Superhero, because I do delve into it in the novel. But what I would say, and this is very much a compliment to Kevin Feige, is that somehow when we were making Hulk, it felt like he and the team under him at Marvel understood this was going to be big.
Okay.
And of course, Iron Man had proven it at that point. So I wasn't in the inaugural film. But if you look at Iron Man and the way that it was resourced under the direction of Jon Favreau, they were making a big budget tentpole movie. And it certainly felt that way on Hulk. Anytime you look over on a set and there's a B techno crane, you know that it's well resourced. And by that I mean that they've not only rented a techno crane, which is very expensive, but they have one in case a techno crane breaks down.
It's a nice luxury.
And they were using a techno crane on stage in addition to outside. And so instead of a dolly. And that it was well resourced. It was a big tentpole movie, and Louis Leterrier, a wonderful director, had what he needed to tell this story in an exciting way. So was Captain America, when I came back 16 years later to be this villain that I'd been promised in the initial Hulk franchise, was that a different type of set? Yes. It was even more resourced.
They had a sea crane.
No.
Yeah, effectively, yes. But also digital effects have changed everything, and the scanning and all of that. And that's why I hope people will read the novel, because I get into all that. I think few people know what goes into the making of these movies. Mm-hmm. It is a gargantuan. It's a massive undertaking.
You've had a 30-year career that has spanned a lot of different styles. So you have your superhero stuff on one side, and then you have your work with like the Coen brothers on the other side. And so I mean, filmmaking is in a completely different place than when it started. Do you feel like, what are some of those differences that you feel like? There's the resource element, but then there's also, I don't know, have there been attitude changes?
The industry right now is undergoing cataclysmic shifts. And some of it is good, a lot of it is very painful. So just as an example, it was a cataclysmic shift and a harbinger, I guess would be a better way of putting it, when Joel and Ethan decided to make Buster Scruggs with Netflix.
Sure, yeah.
And Joel famously said in the announcement, I think on Deadline, "We're streaming motherfuckers." and I talked to Joel about that, and he said, well, all Ethan and I want to do is keep making movies. And so if this is the way we're going to end up doing it, then yes, we have to succumb to that. But Joel and Ethan, like all the rest of us, aren't making their movies for home theater screens.
Sure.
We want them to be seen big. That's why you have filmmakers like Brady Corbet and Mona Fastvold and others still shooting on film and doing these 70 millimeter prints. We all, it's presumptuous of me to put myself in that group, but I'll just say, as somebody who makes films, and I have a new film of my own coming out next year called The Life and Deaths of Wilson Shedd, I want it to be seen in movie theaters, and that's just less and less becoming the venue. So that's the biggest change. Because when we're making a movie, and this is certainly true of the Marvel movies and the DC movies, we're making them with big screens and great sound systems in 200 to 400 seat theaters in mind. Mm-hmm. We're not thinking about people in their living rooms. We're idealizing the situation and construing, as we are working in the sound mix, but also in the shooting of the movie, the best possible venue. And that's a big time cinema. Mm-hmm. I'm 61 years old. I grew up with going to the movies. That was the highlight of the weekend, and it was at a cinema, and it was special to go and do that. We want that still to be the case. So it is changing in a big way right now, particularly for indie cinema, because it's hard to monetize that without art house cinemas and a movie running for 6 weeks before it goes to streaming. Mm-hmm. So you just can't get these movies made the way you used to in the 90s and early 2000s. For the big movies, which is kind of, I think, more the subject of your podcast, it means that a Marvel movie has to be bigger and bolder and much more of an event. You need something like the Red Hulk tearing apart the White House that necessitates somebody seeing it in a movie theater with great sound for the total experience. You have more movies that are built for an IMAX run because you can't have IMAX at home. So it's just placed more demand on these movies to be movie theater events. And I think that's probably a good thing for superhero movies, mm-hmm. because it's fun to see the Red Hulk take apart the White House.
And yet I'll say one of my most immersive experiences this year, because I was lucky enough to see it on the big screen, was Catherine Bigelow's House of Dynamite, mm-hmm. because I felt like I couldn't get out of the situation. I was trapped in the seat for the 2 hours. If I was at home, I might have been distracted. I might have paused it. But the tension that's ratcheted up over the course of that film deserved to be enjoyed in a 2 hour block.
So Sean, if you could just say that over and over again and dedicate your and Sierra's podcast to that sort of sentiment,
yes,
you'd be doing a great service to filmmakers, because of course we want our movies to be in those theaters. But unfortunately, the home systems now compete just enough with that, where you can say, well, it's not letterboxed anymore because my home screen is 185.
Right, sure.
And the speaker system is better. And it actually kind of looks like a movie up there on the flat plasma screen.
Sure.
And I can even have 5.1 sound in my living room. Mm-hmm. And so people, therefore, are neglecting the movie theater, which is where not just big event movies, but art films should be seen. Because we give a shit. And when we're making, as filmmakers, when we're making these movies and making decisions about the color grade and the score and the Foley and what it sound, the sound mix, we're imagining our audience in a movie theater.
I mean, I believe so strongly in voting with your wallet. If there is something that I want more of, I pay to go see that. I make sure I make a point of it. And I wonder, what are some things that that we should be telling audiences to do to support that kind of filmmaking?
Well, that's a tough question. And I also agree with voting with our wallets. I'm an avowed capitalist. I believe in our system, and I don't believe in a nanny state, and I don't believe in supercilious nanny artists wagging our fingers and saying, you must go to the movie theater. Hmm. Unfortunately, right now, we're in a situation, and I alluded to it moments ago, to where television screens the delivery system that can happen in a home is much better than it used to be.
Sure.
And it distinguishes itself. And so people spend money to buy a great television and sound system so that they can sit at home. Filmmakers need to make better movies, and theater owners need to make movie theaters unique. So you look at a guy like Tim League, who started Alamo Drafthouse.
Right.
There you go. He really cares about curation and presentation. So he puts great movies on those screens. The screens are state of the art. The projection is straight of the art. You're never feeling like there's a lamp out or, it's always really a crisp image. Mm-hmm. The sound is extraordinary, and you get a good meal.
Yeah.
And so you get kind of the home experience, but you get a movie on a movie screen, first-rate projection, first-rate sound. So there you have an answer. You have places like in New York City where I live, the Metrograph, which is a great calendar house with a great restaurant upstairs. And so it's an appealing evening out. And I'm sorry, but that's the predicament in which home theaters have put us.
Right.
And so instead of just caving in and saying, okay, Netflix, go buy Warner Brothers and prove to everyone that the home screen wins, you've got to fight.
Tim, we grew up around the same time, and I'm of the, but like, I don't want a crying baby sitting next to me, but the murmur in the theater is part of the atmosphere. The reactions in the crowd to me are part of the experience. I don't need my movie theater to be a church, where we're all sitting deadly still and processing. I almost appreciate some of the noise that comes with it all.
So I do to a degree.
Okay.
I don't mind hearing breathing and the collective laughter, collective despair, jump scares. All that is great.
Sure.
And it's much more fun to do that in a room full of strangers. But I'm short, so I don't like tall people in front of me. And I don't like people who talk during the movie. So, but yeah, sure. I think the collective experience is essential, and we're a social animal.
Yeah.
And I think coming together in the community is an essential part of the experience of storytelling. And so, yeah, I want to go and be in a full movie theater. But mostly what I love about the movie theater is the big screen and the great sound.
All right, I want to ask you a creative question that might be a little bit esoteric. I was reading an interview you were doing with one of our colleagues, Brian Cronin, who writes for CBR, and you were discussing the writing process of your book, Superhero, and how throughout the course of it, you didn't necessarily have your ending. You didn't know where it was going to go, and that was part of your process. Is that correct?
That is correct. Way? I generally lead with character and let the characters, as they struggle amongst themselves, I let them guide me and lead. Now, when you write that way, you then have to go back retroactively and shape stuff, because as a storyteller, you're responsible for every moment that happens being essential to the forward movement. Mm-hmm. And sometimes characters, like we do in real life, act extraneously. And you need to shape and correct for that. Mm-hmm. But I like characters leading me. And so what happens with Peter, I don't know if you guys have read the book or not, but what happens with the character of Peter was not something I imagined was going to occur when I set out writing the book.
Now, so from that perspective, when you get a screenplay, to what percentage of importance do you put the ending, that the story that's being told sticks the landing. For you, if the characters are interesting enough, but the ending might not quite get there, is that still intriguing to you?
Are you talking to me as an actor?
Yeah. Yes. I guess I'm switching gears to say as an actor.
Character is what's most important to me, and the challenge of playing a character.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to involve myself with projects that aren't going to go anywhere.
Okay.
I want to believe in what I'm up to. So sometimes I've said, well, this is a really intriguing character to play, but I'm not sure about the overall. I'm not sure about the overall trajectory. Maybe I'm not going to do this. Mm-hmm. I've been very lucky of late in that I've done this string of independent films with characters I've really wanted to play, and in movies made by really interesting, usually younger filmmakers who want me to come on as a producer.
Okay.
And so when welcome, and only when welcome, I've been able to say, look, did you consider changing this or addressing this issue? And sometimes that has to do with a story's denouement. Mm-hmm. And so I've worked with the filmmaker to help them, again, just when they've wanted that.
Yeah.
And with them always having the last say, because it's a director's medium.
Gotcha.
So we talked a little about character, but what makes something a Tim Blake Nelson role?
Oh, well, I'm not sure how to answer that, except that it's a self-selective process. This is a podcast, so people can't see my face, but you've seen my face if you've seen me in movies. There are just certain roles that I'm not going to play. A romantic lead is seldom in my inbox with an offer.
But would you want that?
No, I mean, I have played a couple of romantic leads in oddball movies, and that's interesting to me. So, but usually, I guess where I'd like to come down is in being able to play characters, extreme characters, but humanize them. Make them real, believable, sensitive, deeply accurate. And I have spent decades working toward that. And I think where I've failed in certain roles, it's on that basis, where early on in some of my performances, it's a bit too cartoony.
Interesting.
For what was called for. And I went too far. And my focus now has really been to meet the project on its terms, which is guided by the writer-director or the director, and work within those aesthetic principles to have the character accurately and sensitively make sense and cohere within the storytelling, and never stick out in a way that's distracting. Mm-hmm. And that kind of tenderness and sensitivity to something greater than oneself is what I'd like to be remembered for, I guess.
Tim, I want to praise your dialogue in Superhero. It's crackling. I can't help but read it and envision it in live action. I want to ask if there are some of the screenwriters that you most admire, maybe some of them that you might have run some pages past or let them read some of this to get a sense of how you formed your own voice. And is a live action adaptation of something like Superhero even possible in the world of, Seth Rogen doing the studio and going all the way back to Altman and the player? Is this something you'd like to see maybe translated?
Working backwards, I would say that, sure, superhero could be a film or a limited series, but it would have to be transformed in terms of its aesthetic strategies into that. By which I mean that I'm very invested in the novel of superhero being a novel, as a novel, so that form is content. And what I've done in the book, exploit to the maximum extent that it's prose. And so there, you really get inside of characters' heads. They talk sometimes in long speeches that are rare in real life, except for when you ask an idiot like me a question on a podcast and you can't shut up.
No, we love that here.
I'm invested in the novelness, not the novelty, but the novelness, the thingness of the thing, the novelness of the novel. And so, yeah, I think superhero would be exciting in a screen adaptation, but you'd want to make it something that if you watched it as a movie or a limited series, you would almost say, well, how is this ever a novel?
Okay, gotcha.
It has to be a limited series, or it has to be a movie. I don't. What would what? How is that a novel? Okay, so that was your second question, and your first one was about the dialogue and screenwriters I like. I do, during the process of writing, share the material with others just to get feedback, like any of us does. There's a playwright named Keith Radine who's been very important to me in that regard. I share stuff with Joel and Ethan. But I don't think, other than saying maybe there's too much dialogue, I don't think anybody ever really helped shape the dialogue. It kind of is what it is. It came out of my thinking about the various characters. Screenwriters I love. I think Joel and Ethan are the top.
Of course.
But Joel and Ethan write for Joel and Ethan. Now they've worked on other people's material, sometimes ghostwriting and sometimes credited. They've done a lot of work with Spielberg. And then with some other writers, I know of one movie they helped write, and they're not credited. But generally, I think what makes Joel and Ethan special is that they direct their own movies. So they are extraordinary writers for Coen Brothers movies and the way they direct those movies.
Any insight on when they're going to get back together?
I know they do have a script that they want to make together. When they're going to do that, I'm not sure, but it is written.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good to know.
That's the best news I've heard all year. Tim, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us, and we hope to have you again sometime.
It was my pleasure, and I'm grateful that you've took an interest in the novel, especially given who and what you are and your audience. So it was my pleasure to talk with you.
We want to thank Tim Blake Nelson for coming on to Hero's Journey, and definitely pick up a copy of his book, Superhero. It's a fiction novel, people should know, even though it's really a behind the scenes of how these superhero films get put together. Sierra, you did not get to bring up holes. I was really disappointed. I saw an opportunity for you, and I thought you were going to go for it.
I tried, couldn't work it in. I felt like we were on a completely different trajectory. And, it's good to not reveal yourself to be the child in the room.
No, but sometimes that happens, right? Like you hear an opportunity to bring up something that you want to discuss, and then all of a sudden the conversation starts to shift in a different direction. You're like, no, I want to go back to where we were because I was going to bring up holes.
Yeah, there's so much to talk to. And I feel like I got what I wanted from it, which was him talking a little bit about his, what a Tim Blake Nelson role is. And I feel like, Dr. Pendanski is a great example of those more cartoonish roles that he used to take. And so I think that's really interesting.
he gives such unique insight into the making of the superhero films because he's been there since day one. Like, as you guys heard him talk about in the interview, he was in the second MCU movie of all time. And it feels like the different movies that he's been involved in, whether it be The Incredible Hulk or a film that we didn't really get to dive into with him, which is Josh Trank's Fantastic Four movie, he's seen really troubled comic book films, and their inner workings. With The Incredible Hulk, it was Edward Norton, clashing with the director and wanting to have more of an editorial voice. With Fantastic Four, there are a litany of issues you can get into about things that went wrong with that film. But you can see why Tim Blake Nelson would want to write a novel that dives into how difficult it is to put a superhero movie like this together.
I mean, hey, we talked about adaptation. I think it might be ripe for it. We'll see a nice little retrospective on the MCU, pending what happens with Doomsday coming soon and Secret Wars.
The next big thing that we anticipate, which could be next week, it could be next week's episode, we truly don't know, is the Avengers Doomsday trailer. Sierra, these are the heavy hitters that are coming into 2026. And so it's why we created this show, right? We want to be able to talk about these things as they happen.
Battle of the big boys.
Yeah, exactly. With a tiny little Spider-Man worked in there somewhere, but I don't think that trailer is coming anytime soon. I'm going to place my bets that next week's episode, we'll be discussing Avengers Doomsday. So why don't you guys do me a favor, lock it in, meet us back here next week. We'll have something really exciting for you guys to listen to on Heroes Journey. Thank you to Tim Blake Nelson for joining the show. He's amazing. And we'll talk to you guys next week.
Like, comment, subscribe, etc. Bye.